into the ITV News at 10.
She has the most sobering of all possible in-trays.
Liz Truss is elected as the leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party.
Tomorrow, Liz Truss will become our fourth Prime Minister in only 6 years, promising one thing above all.
I will deliver a bold plan. I will deliver on the energy crisis. We all will deliver, 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 deliver.
There is a huge amount to assess tonight. How will the new PM deal with the cost of living crisis? Will she go ahead with promised tax cuts? And what will the impact of both be on our public finances and much more? Also on News at 10. She is the UK's third female Prime Minister, so who is the real Liz Truss? What about our place in the world? How will she approach our fractured relationship with the EU? Life after the flood, Raggy makes an uncomfortable journey through a landscape that was once a thriving community of 3,000.
What's happened?
Graveyard.
It's a graveyard.
And they are back, but with no plans to meet his immediate family.
So to meet again here on UK soil with him by my side makes it all feel full circle.
From Downing Street, this is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby.
Good evening from Downing Street, where once again the staff are about to welcome a new Prime Minister, their fourth in just 6 years. As you probably know by now, it will be Liz Truss, elected by her party today by a sizable but not overwhelming majority. Barring further turmoil, she should be in here until 2024, which she signalled today would be the date for the next general election, attempting to squash any speculation she could go to the country sooner. When Liz Truss does arrive here tomorrow, she will face one heck of an in-tray. She promised help with energy bills within days. She committed herself once again to what she called a bold plan to cut taxes. She was uncompromising too about her support for Boris Johnson. You are admired from Kyiv to Carlisle, she said, to slightly hesitant applause. Of course, she does not officially take over from him until invited to do so by the Queen tomorrow, when one Elizabeth meets the other at Balmoral.
The outsider who became the racing certainty, Liz Truss, arrived in Westminster to find out if all the polls were right that she's new Tory leader and from tomorrow Britain's new Prime Minister. Walking into the hall with the challenger, Rishi Sunak, and from the spring in her step, the result wasn't a surprise.
Rishi Sunak, 60,399. Liz Truss, 81,326. Therefore, I give notice that Liz Truss is elected as the leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party. We'll come up on front.
Whoops, no commiserating handshake for Sunak from the winner.
Friends and colleagues, thank you for putting your faith in me to lead our great Conservative Party, the greatest political party on earth.
A tribute to the departing Prime Minister, which elicited a slightly muted response.
Boris, you got Brexit done. You crushed Jeremy Corbyn. You rolled out the vaccine and you stood up to Vladimir Putin. You were admired from Kiev to Carlisle.
But what about the huge challenges this country faces?
I will deliver a bold plan to cut taxes and grow our economy. I will deliver on the energy crisis, dealing with people's energy bills, but also dealing with the long-term issues we have on energy supply. Because, my friends, I know that we will deliver, we will deliver, and we will deliver. And we we will deliver a great victory for the Conservative Party in 2024. Thank you. Thank you.
So perhaps not a surprise, she doesn't want an early election. Just give us a sense of how you feel now.
I'm really elated. I mean, it was a really long, hard-fought campaign.
It's also good that it's over.
As for the loser, he wasn't keen to appear on camera, though he did say on social media that it's right we now unite behind the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss. On a school visit, Labour's leader had a lesson for the almost PM.
She needs to deal with the cost of living crisis, she needs to deal with the fact the NHS is on its knees, and she needs to deal with the collapse of law and order. And there can be no justification for not freezing energy prices.
What's your message to the woman who has dismissed you as an attention seeker who should be ignored? Now she is to be the UK's next Prime Minister.
Well, I genuinely wish Liz Truss all the best. I congratulate her on her appointment as Prime Minister. I know how tough leadership is in the best of times, and we don't live in the best of times. The UK is in probably the worst and most acute crisis of our lifetimes.
Today, Liz Truss got the job of her dreams and she went to Tory HQ this afternoon to say thanks. But goodness, she faces health, diplomatic and economic emergencies. When she moves in here tomorrow, she'll finalise a £100 billion plan due on Thursday to put a ceiling on crippling energy prices, which could turn out to be the most important policy of her time as Prime Minister, however long or short that turns out to be. Robert Peston, News at 10.
Well, as Robert was saying there, once Liz Truss has been asked by the Queen to form a government, there will be no time to waste. There's an energy crisis to confront and a divided party to heal. How she does both will depend on her cabinet choices. Priti Patel, perhaps seeing the writing on the wall, says she will be resigning tomorrow as Home Secretary.
Sometimes the QE2 Centre in Westminster hosts bands. But today it was the Conservatives marching in, led by this man, Sir Graham Brady, ready to answer his party's leadership question. Inside, he began with a quick check. Others milled around, some getting ready for big jobs. Kwasi Kwarteng as Chancellor, perhaps. Jacob Rees-Mogg tipped for business. James Cleverly as Britain's new representative to the world. Once she'd taken centre stage, our new Prime Minister, faced with an astonishingly severe cost of living crisis, seemed very focused on one word.
I will deliver a bold plan. I will deliver on the energy crisis. We all will deliver. Liz
Truss says she wants to deliver. To do that, she has to get votes through Parliament, and that means uniting a party that has torn itself apart this summer. There are MPs in this crowd who tell me they're not yet convinced by her approach.
But Penny Mordaunt, who herself ran for the leadership, said she believed MPs would come together despite ferocious disagreements this summer.
There have been vicious arguments, haven't there?
The party is very disciplined. We've had this contest. We've obviously had discussions over policy. There's been very passionate debate. But now we have to come together, and the party will do that.
So it's a matter of choice for MPs. They know how to do it. They can mess about, play games, or they can decide they want to serve the people of this country through an historic crisis on several fronts.
The pain caused by that historic crisis has been witnessed by MPs in their constituencies and will now be urgently debated in Parliament. Liz Truss had said she didn't like handouts, but those around her are clear something big is coming.
She has always made it clear that we need to support the people in society that need our support. We also have to address the longer term drivers for energy increases, including the war in Ukraine and also domestic and international energy generation.
Ideas like a £100 billion energy price freeze will now be discussed at Downing Street by a new cabinet, as some, like Home Secretary Priti Patel, write resignation letters, jumping before they are pushed. The Deputy Prime Minister isn't expecting a call either.
The new Prime Minister, it's always their prerogative to pick their top team, and I'm certainly not expecting to be given an appointment.
So you are expecting to be out of a job come tomorrow?
Yes.
Joining him on the backbenches, Boris Johnson, leaving Downing Street tomorrow and flying to Scotland to see the Queen before a new Prime Minister takes over. Anushka Rastana, News at 10.
Liz Truss set out in that post-victory speech her top 3 challenges, and boy, are they going to be challenging. She wants to cut taxes and grow the economy, which is already beset by rampant inflation, currently running at 10.1%. She wants to deliver, as you heard, on the NHS, and no wonder at the start of the summer there were a record 6.7 million people in England alone waiting for treatment. And, most pressing of all perhaps, she will, she says, deal with people's energy bills. We already know average annual bills are going up to £3,549 under the latest price cap, but dealing with them could be mind-bogglingly expensive. Wholesale gas prices for the UK jumped 25% today.
Okay, thank you. Love you.
Love you too.
Pensioner Irene Helmstocker is carer for her husband. Terrifying energy bills mean she's already in debt. She wants to know how and when the new Prime Minister will change things.
I don't put my gas on. I never have a light on in the house. We always sit in the dark. Can't have the heating on, it's as simple as that. We just can't have it. I'll wear my dressing gown and pyjamas and hot water bottles.
An energy price cap freeze is one option for the new Prime Minister. Average annual prices are due to increase to more than £3,500 in October. To peg them at current levels, just under £2,000, government could guarantee loans to the industry, estimated at up to £100 billion, which customers could repay through their bills for the next 10 to 15 years, or which could be repaid through general taxation.
So hopefully we're going to be paying your energy bills £400 a month for 4 months.
Today, this competition ran on TV, as for millions, affording energy now seems a dream on a par with winning the lottery.
Energy bills! Energy bills!
One energy boss says an immediate focus on power bills by Liz Truss is reassuring.
So I do welcome the fact that the incoming government recognises the idea that the place that wholesale prices have got to makes energy unaffordable for a large number of homes and businesses, and a large intervention to buffer that shock is a vital response to it.
So as with most small to medium-sized enterprises like ourselves, we're using quite a lot of energy. We've got gas and electric running through our coffee roaster.
The price cap doesn't apply to businesses, so they'd miss out on any help delivered that way.
What we want is the new Prime Minister to be able to put a price cap in for commercial energy, as our energy bills are certainly doubled, they're set to triple, and could easily be somewhere like 5 times the amount, which is just not sustainable.
With households under such stress, even if energy prices rise no further, that's only part of this cost of living crisis, shaping lives and politics, potentially for years. Chris Choi, News at 10.
And Robert is here to talk about all this. Yeah. Look, Robert, millions of people, what they want to know tonight more than anything else is what is she going to do on the cost of living crisis?
So there we are, fourth Tory Prime Minister since 2015. Plenty of crises you and I have discussed since then, but this economic crisis, arguably worse than anything else we've seen before. Soaring inflation, soaring energy prices. There is on Thursday, as I understand it, going to be a big package of help to hold down energy prices for households and also for businesses, and targeted help, particularly for those who have least, those on lowest incomes. It will cost an enormous amount of money. Ballparks of 100 billion are being suggested to me. Now, the backdrop to all of this for the Prime Minister is very difficult. The pound against the dollar fell 1 point to 1.14. These are, well, we did touch it very briefly during COVID, but these are levels, low levels for the pound that we have not seen since the 1980s. We are therefore shipping in inflation as a result of this fall in the pound. And the fundamental problem for the Prime Minister is that we have these twin problems of zero growth, probably in recession already, and high inflation. International investors do not want to put their money here because they can't see the returns as being available. They think the returns here are worse than elsewhere. So there's a genuine risk and this is the thing that she's got to be scared about, that if the markets think that what her new Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, announces on Thursday increases inflation even more, and this is what Rishi Sunak was warning about all through the campaign, the pound could fall even further and that inflation problem could get even worse. So this opening announcement is actually potentially not just make or break for us, but for her reputation too.
OK, which brings us to another obvious point.
Yeah.
She said she's going to cut taxes. She absolutely is. Some people say that'll fuel inflation further. Obviously, that has impact for the public finances. Do you think she will? And what do you make of its impact?
Well, it would be incredibly difficult for her not to make good on that commitment, not to increase national insurance, or rather to cut that national insurance which has already been imposed, and not to increase business taxes. She won't do that on Thursday. She will say that it's going to happen. But let's just wait and see what the market's reaction is to, those energy announcements on Thursday. She says she's completely committed to being the first proper Tory, in her words, i.e. low taxes, that we've seen for years and years and years. But the risks of doing it too soon, as I said earlier, are very big for her.
OK, we'll come back to you at the end because there's a huge amount to talk about. But Mary Elizabeth Truss will be the second Prime Minister in a row to be known by her second name after Alexander Boris Johnson. She'll be the third woman to hold the office, and her political journey here has had its twists and turns. The Lib Dem activist who became a Conservative Foreign Secretary, the Remainer who now agrees with Brexit. How she handles the big issues of our age will shape the life of the country, and as Robert was discussing with us just there, all of our lives too.
This is my homeland. This is my school. This is where my mum now lives, in Chapel Allerton. So
Liz Truss has often been keen to point up her Yorkshire roots, but our new Prime Minister is not easy to pigeonhole geographically or politically. She was actually born in Oxford in 1975. The family then moved to Paisley in Scotland, where the young Liz and her parents went on anti-nuclear and anti-Margaret Thatcher marches. She did go to secondary school in Yorkshire, Roundhay School in Leeds, a state school that's certainly a long way from the Eton of her predecessor.
many of the children I were at school with were let down by low expectations, poor educational standards and a lack of opportunity.
Contemporaries from that time say it was not the failing school she painted it as.
She was speaking in large part to the audience she needed to speak to, which was the Conservative membership, which has now made her Prime Minister, by saying things like we were taught about racism and sexism rather than reading and writing. I can't find anybody who was at school in the early 90s who thinks that's true.
If her childhood was peripatetic, her politics have travelled too.
Everybody in Britain should have the chance to be a somebody. But only one family can provide the head of state.
This was a student Liz Truss arguing for the abolition of the monarchy as a member of the Lib Dems.
How much of it she actually believed in, I couldn't possibly tell you. You can never tell with Liz. I think sometimes she enjoys making the speeches, she enjoys getting the reaction, building her credibility with the people she's trying to appeal to.
Once she decided the Tories were a better fit, she moved up quickly, holding 6 ministerial jobs under 3 prime ministers, even with a speaking style like this.
We import 2/3 of our cheese. That is a disgrace.
Keenly aware of the power of personal publicity, she hasn't shied away from comparisons to Margaret Thatcher, whilst claiming any similarity in these images is entirely coincidental. Showing impressive survival skills, her conversion from Remainer to committed Brexiter hasn't harmed her either. So what does she believe in?
I'm expecting a Prime Minister who's going to drive us towards lower taxes, more enterprise, less regulation, and she's going to have to do it quickly. There will be mistakes, there will be missteps, there might even be the occasional skid off the road, but there'll be no direction, there'll be no question about the direction that Liz Truss wants to actually drive the car in.
Married to an accountant, Hugh, who was by her side to watch her victory, Liz Truss's rise to become Britain's next and our third female Prime Minister, the culmination of quite a journey. Romilly Weeks, News at 10.
This is a moment of change, so here is how the next few days will play out. Tomorrow morning, Boris Johnson will make his final speech as Prime Minister here outside Number 10. He and Liz Truss will then head to Balmoral in Scotland, where Mr Johnson will tender his resignation to the Queen. Miss Truss will be asked by the Queen to form a government. She'll then head back down here to Downing Street as Prime Minister to address the nation. I'll be here in the street for that at 4, so please do tune in to watch. Tomorrow evening, she'll appoint her first cabinet, who will meet on Wednesday morning before Miss Truss faces Sir Keir Starmer at her first Prime Minister's question. One of her first jobs will be to speak to other world leaders. Around Europe, there hasn't been too much sorrow, I think it's fair to say, at Boris Johnson's departure, other than in Ukraine, as we'll be hearing in a moment. Rohit is in the capital, Kyiv, tonight. But first, let's go to James in Paris with reaction from France and the rest of Europe to Liz Truss becoming Prime Minister. James, during the campaign, Liz Truss rather famously said the jury was out over whether President Macron is friend or foe. So I guess there are some pretty big bridges to rebuild already.
Oh, without question. He sort of referenced that in his congratulatory message to her today, saying the British people are our friends, the British nation is our ally. Now, those are either warm words or pointed words, depending on your point of view. Similar sentiments from the German leadership and from the European Commission in Brussels, though the president there, Ursula von der Leyen, concluded her message by saying, I look forward to a constructive relationship in full respect of our agreements. Now, that, of course, is a direct reference to the Northern Ireland Protocol. It was Liz Truss, as Foreign Secretary, who introduced a bill that's going through Parliament now to scrap that protocol, to scrap that agreement, arguably in breach of international law. If they press ahead with that and do that, it will undoubtedly poison relationships catastrophically. But that will be a good indicator to many here as to what her intentions are. I mean, it's fair to say most European capitals really do want better relations with London at a time when Western unity is being tested like no time since the Cold War, when everyone's facing the same energy and cost of living and inflation crisis, much of which they'd love to cooperate on. None of them, I really think, have the bandwidth or the focus at the moment to really try and reset relations with London, if that's not clearly what Liz Truss wants, but they certainly would like it.
Okay, James, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's go to Rohit in Ukraine. Look, Rohit, I think even Boris Johnson's harshest critics would say he was steadfast in his support for Ukraine in its battle against Russian aggression. And President Zelensky has been repeatedly grateful for that. What are they looking for from his successor?
Well, Tom, I think a really key point here is that a lot of people in Ukraine care. They've been following the contest. They're familiar with the contenders. They're interested in the result. And part of the reason for that is that although the UK isn't the biggest financial contributor to the defence of Ukraine, it's seen by many as perhaps the most unequivocal, and the perception is a lot of that is tied up with the personal relationship between Volodymyr Zelensky and Boris Johnson. So the question comes, what happens once he's out of office? Now, the answer is probably not very much changes. Remember, Liz Truss is not a newcomer to this conflict. She was a foreign secretary. In fact, we were with her the week before the invasion at one of the buildings beneath us, the foreign ministry, just a few days before Russia invaded. So Zelensky officials are perhaps fairly calm that that level of support will continue. Perhaps what they're more worried about is what happens after that. What happens if the domestic and international priorities collide, whether a cost of living crisis constrains the ability of the UK government to continue support at these levels. And so that, by the way, might explain why we've seen so much of Zelensky and his wife in the British media over the last few days. The message they're trying to project is that people should continue to care about the plight of the Ukrainians.
Okay, Rohit, thank you very much indeed. Well, let's move on to the flooding in Pakistan, where water levels in the south of the country are inching ever higher, and those inches are critical, the difference between villages surviving or going under. In Sindh province in the southeast, it is touch and go for places like Sultan. Using such help from the Pakistan army as there is, they are taking no chances and getting out while they can.
You would never know it, but until a few weeks ago, all this was a thriving community of villages, agricultural fields, shops, and 3,000 people. But incredibly, many people are still stuck in the few homes which have not been drowned by the floodwaters, and this is a mission to rescue them. So as you can see, some flood defences have been built along the side with the help of the Pakistani military, and they're taking us in this boat to try and find some people who have survived or been marooned in their houses and homes, many of which are very, very much submerged. Where there were once roads and buildings, landmarks which allowed you to find your way, there is now only endless water. A local guide accompanied us to try and find the best route. Trees, houses, petrol stations, even mosques, all consumed by the floodwaters. So how deep is it?
Your water?
Yeah.
20 feet.
20 feet. The water may be 20 feet in some places, but it's far shallower elsewhere. And suddenly, we had a problem. What's happened?
Graveyard.
It's a graveyard?
Yes.
Okay, I think we're out of being grounded. Can you see them over there? They're people up to their waists, just coming out that house. Round. Others who had taken sanctuary on a rooftop guided us in. We had to steer the boat into what had been narrow alleyways of a village. No sooner had we got off the boat than we realized the village of Sultan had been turned into an island in a sea of floodwater. The stranded villagers described what they'd had to endure. What have you and all the families been eating? No eating. The villagers began assembling all their worldly goods, stuffed into cases, which they were determined to take with them. This woman, standing alone, clutching her handbag with her most precious possessions. I've lived here all my life, Jamila Patti told me. We need help. We've lost everything. Our houses are completely destroyed, and now we'll have to leave our animals behind in all this water. The villagers piled up the cases they were determined not to leave behind. Some people will come and steal it.
They steal it.
That's the fear, that obviously the boats are very small. Their priority is to take them, but obviously they want to take their luggage, saying that if they leave their possessions here, who knows what will happen to it. Some people might come and steal it. The army persuaded them to leave as much behind as they could, which would be guarded by a few villagers who'd remain behind. Then the evacuation started. Mostly of children and women. Okay, there are now, I've counted, around 20 people, 22 people, including children, on the boat. And the main thing is that we tried to not run aground. It was a precarious journey back to land. The searing heat and lack of food were taking their toll on the most vulnerable. But there was too a sense of hope and relief, as others looked back on their homes, wondering when they'd return. And finally, they were brought to safety. It's been 2 weeks, in fact over 2 weeks, since floods devastated a third of Pakistan, affecting 30 million people. It's extraordinary to think that in that time there are still people marooned, desperately in need of being rescued. And as authorities warn of rising levels of flood waters in southern Sindh province, one wonders how many more cut-off villages like Sultan remain to be rescued. Raghi Omar, News at 10, Pakistan.
A frantic search is underway in Canada for two men who are on the run, suspected of carrying out one of the country's deadliest mass killings. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has warned the public to be careful. 10 people were stabbed to death in two separate locations in Saskatchewan province. One of the attacks was at the hometown of an Indigenous community. One of the leaders there suggested it could be drugs related in some way. Back here, the week-long strikes by criminal barristers in England and Wales that have been held every other week will from now on become permanent. Members of the Criminal Bar Association have begun indefinite, uninterrupted strike action over pay for legal aid work. They are due to get a 15% rise at the end of the month. Well over 6,000 court hearings have been disrupted so far. They are no longer working royals, of course, but Harry and Meghan have work of their own that has brought them back to the UK. Tonight in Manchester, Meghan gave a speech to open a summit for young people, telling them it was very nice to be back in the UK, and this time with her husband by her side. Next stop, Germany, for Harry's Games for Injured Servicemen and Women, where his Invictus series will be held next year. There will be no stop at the homes of his father or his brother.
At the back of a Manchester conference centre tonight, Harry and Meghan have just arrived. Inside, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex have come to open a summit for young people.
Please welcome Meghan and Harry, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex.
This was the couple's first UK engagement focused on their charity work since they left the royal family. You need no reminders how divisive that was, and back on the street, it was playing out in public.
She's the most toxic, divisive woman I've ever heard of in my life.
You're literally on the street arguing about Meghan Markle. She's in there successful.
An absolute hypocrite.
Purposely travelled out of their way to boo them, which I mean is more of a waste of their energy than it is anyone else's.
We want to report what happened accurately, and what you're saying is a lot of people were there to cheer them, but some people had come to boo.
Not some people, a minority of people had come to boo them.
As for the summit itself, there was nothing but support, both for Meghan and, when she spoke, from Meghan.
It is very nice to be back in the UK. I am thrilled that my husband is able to join me here this time. One Young World has been an integral part of my life for so many years before I met him. So to meet again here on UK soil with him by my side makes it all feel full circle.
Some of those listening tonight had their own views on why Meghan has been the target of such criticism.
The criticism is unfair that's targeted towards her.
And why do you think she gets that?
I think we all know, and it's because
You think it's because of the colour of her skin?
Of course, it's the colour of her skin.
As they left, there was clear vocal support. Harry and Meghan provoke strong reactions, but never, it seems, indifference. Chris Ship, News at 10, Manchester.
Well, here in Downing Street, it will be all changed tomorrow. So let's get Robert's final thoughts on that. I mean, how much turbulence have we had? How many times have we stood in this street? How many dramatic events? How many changes? The fourth Prime Minister in 6 years from one party. It's kind of amazing, isn't it? So I guess stability is what she needs to achieve above all.
And she's going to struggle to get it. I mean, we only have to remember that Boris Johnson won that landslide at the end of 2019. You'd have thought that would have guaranteed him.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember actually the night of the programme, we said he's going to be in power for possibly 10 years.
Yeah.
You know, he's gone 2.5 years later. The pressures on Liz Truss are immense. We've already talked about how if she gets support for hard-pressed families over energy, actually her reputation could slump dramatically within days and weeks. She's going to need the support of people who work there and all around us in Whitehall. Jacob Rees-Mogg actually put out a tweet today. He's going to be the business secretary, we understand, saying his plan to cut civil servants by 25% is, in his words, oven ready. So the people who work for her are going to feel pretty demoralised. So Stakes enormously high for her, stakes enormously high for the country. And the one thing she'll be bearing in mind all the way through she didn't get a majority of MPs supporting her. She didn't even get a majority of eligible members voting today. She's going to have her work cut out to get that stability you talked about.
OK, Robert, for now, we'll talk about it many more times, but thank you very much for now. And that is just about it for tonight. Here outside number 10 in the morning, Boris Johnson will deliver his farewell speech. The personality politician with a once-in-a-generation majority, as Robert was just saying, who got Brexit done, will be out of the door after 3 tumultuous years. Through the long weeks of campaigning, Liz Truss has seen the scale of the country's economic problems mount up. Conservative Party members decided she was the one to deal with them. In Liz we trust was their verdict, one might say. She now faces bigger challenges than any incoming Prime Minister for many years. We will be here tomorrow night to discuss all that and much more, but for now, good night. Thanks for watching.
How was the